She left. There she is. The meeting is being recorded. Tell me, can you see the people? Or enough of the people that it counts. If you want to be in the movie, you want to be in the movie?
No, I just not an important way. I'll come sit
next to me anyway. So keep it in mind.
Oh,
that's being recorded.
Right over there. Just turn that first minute off that video. Okay, it is 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 11th. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Danville School Building Advisory Committee. We have board members remote. We have committee members remote. We have people around the room. So we're going to introduce ourselves in this room, and then I'm going to call your name out on Zoom and say hello as well for the record. I'm Clayton Cargill, the chair of the Danville School Board. I'm sitting next to
Mike Moriarty, assistant superintendent.
Rob Ballabé, member of the committee.
committee member.
Yeah, committee member.
Mary Beatty, committee member.
Eric Hewitt, board member.
Molly Gleason, clerk.
And Brandon Lawrence, facilities director.
I have two building principals on Zoom. Sarah,
Sarah Welch, elementary principal.
Natalie,
Natalie Conway, secondary principal.
one more board member on Zoom,
Tim Sanborn, board member.
and another committee member on the Zoom. Stacy?
Yep, Stacy Andre, committee
Stacy
member.
Andre as well. And I don't see anybody else. If anybody else comes in, just give them a chance to say hello, because I can now not see the room. I'm on the webinar. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda before we start? Hearing none. Move on to just a little discussion here. We're here to talk briefly about Act 183 and its impact on our building construction plans. It was brought to our attention by one of our board members during the last board meeting that the yield, what we had been calling the yield bill, and then we were calling H887, that we now call Act 183, had in it a provision that made excess spending it reinstated the excess spending threshold and also instituted a penalty for exceeding the excess spending threshold. And then in that penalty also included any construction charges or any capital fund charges. This is the first time that has happened. What that means is any construction or any bonding that you do that results in construction or results in spending over 118% of the spending threshold, which I sent you a copy of it. I think I sent it maybe just the board members. Would result in a 2-for-1 penalty for every dollar over that amount. What that meant for us locally, and I can explain how we got to this, was that any bonded dollar that we took out would ultimately result in that dollar costing us $2, and would cost the taxpayers $2 in taxes every single year that we were doing it. So we had been considering a 10-year bond, a $20 million bond for a longer amount of time, and even a larger bond to consider which one we were going to push to the community. And based on a conversation I had with the finance director, based on a conversation that the superintendent had with the finance director, and based on a conversation we had with, what are they called? Who are the guys?
Truex Collins.
Truex Collins. We need to grind to a halt here. We cannot ask our people to have their dollars be worth half in a project this large. We have such a small tax base. And I'd like to open this up for some discussion. Dave Toll just got here. Say hi, Dave. So I'd like to open this up for discussion for a second so that we can get to where we can talk about this. Does anybody have any questions about what I just said?
Some quick points of clarification.
Please.
So we are under the excess spending threshold. We're as that sort of graph showed, Mike estimated to be 16,126 per pupil, I think was what he.
So yeah, in that document, I sat with Mike yesterday, and that number is actually the 2026 excess spending threshold. That's what he's estimating it on based on numbers that he has.
Right.
And then he's estimating that we'll move up with inflation about 3%. Mm-hmm. And what it means for us is that if we operate normally, Danville is really in no danger of touching the excess spending threshold.
Right.
We can operate under it.
We are at 14,380 this year. So given if our pupil count stays the same, just so that we understand, we have $922,000 left of spending, of like real actual dollar spending to get to that equalized spending threshold. Just as a, not that we should spend $922,000 just to get to the penalty threshold, but that's the, so there's $922,000.
But that's
for,
right. That's basing 2026 spending on the 2025 budget.
Right.
That's not factoring in any potential changes to include healthcare
Right,
changes, to
right,
include
right.
inflation, to include all the other things that seem to come up every year.
We know
Sure.
a lot of changes go with the.
And then if you have like a system go, does that add into the budget, then it blows us out? Is that what you're saying?
Not so. There is an open question to our legal team from the superintendent that I've not yet heard an answer to, and that is, can we spend unreserved funds as opposed to capital funds to handle an emergency and not have that spending count? I don't know the answer to that.
Okay,
It is a very, that's probably going to end up in the nuance, and they're probably going to tell us it counts, but I'm hopeful that it doesn't, because that's what we don't keep our funds in capital reserve for the most part. We keep our funds in unrestricted reserve so that we're not pinned to capital, so that we can use them freely. And there's a dwindling amount of money in that reserve, but there is some money in that reserve. And so I'm hoping that we can weather one emergency until this gets changed again.
okay.
So we have about $922,000 based on that. I said, when I sat with Mike yesterday, and he showed me the ramifications of the 20-year loan for $20 million or the larger loan.
Mhm.
He could not give me anything that was anything more than speculative, because there are so many numbers that you have to presuppose.
Right.
But when he showed me some preliminary numbers, they basically double from what we looked at before in terms of the tax impact on the people that pay taxes based on the value of their house.
I mean, even that 10 million one is just so far above that threshold. There's no way to-
It puts you $1 million over the threshold, because you have to pay the interest on the borrower.
Yeah.
And so I also sent you some reading that was from a similar school board in a similar situation. I hope you read that. I hope you saw that they saw the same thing we saw.
Yeah.
When I spoke to Cam Truex Cullens, he saw the same thing we saw. He was the superintendent, myself, and Truex Cullens are going to have a brief meeting at some point next week, and maybe Mike will be there, I'm not sure, to figure out how to wind down and get to a stopping point where we might be able to pick this back up. And I can report back to you on that. But at the current time, there's no reason to pursue this any further, because the law now says it is punitive to try to fix your school. If you try to fix your school in any material way because you need to, you will be punished for your taxpayers' dollars. And we cannot, that's not something that we can do to the people of the town. And it's not a valuable proposition.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is, I don't know if they're trying to push us to wait for the construction aid, but where's that money coming from
Yeah.
for that pool? I mean, it's not going to be.
I guess that's one of my lingering questions.
Yeah.
Is what are they trying to push you for?
Or it's
Who
unintended
does this help?
Yeah, or it was.
And this only really helps the couple of school districts that pay in more, so that they're not taking on the burden of other schools, I guess, excess
Yeah.
spending. But it doesn't even help them, because there's no
Right.
help in excess spending. So it just seems to be punitive on accident.
Yeah, they were probably worried about everybody putting through a $70 million bond, and then it affects the entire state education fund. So maybe that's what they were thinking. If they put that limit in there, people aren't just throwing in huge.
This may also be a factor of the money grab from last year for the
Yeah.
people that took the money extra.
Right.
And then they had the extra money, and maybe their budgets passed or didn't pass, or they didn't take it all back out. And if they spend that money that they don't need, they're then penalized locally.
Right.
And this may be a one-year thing, I don't know. But so I cannot figure out in my mind how they got to penalize the taxpayers for trying to fix their schools.
Right.
But that's where they've gotten to, and I think they might have gotten to an accident. This is not the first time Montpelier would have gotten to some place where they thought they were doing a good thing and they ended up doing a bad thing.
Yeah, it also makes you wonder about like the whole PCV conversation too, right?
Right.
It's fully abandoned.
Yeah.
It's your own problem, and we're not testing anybody else's, but those we tested, you got big problems.
You have
See
big
you later.
problems, right?
We'll see you later.
Right.
And we are one of those schools. We have small problems from that, but we have problems from that we were hoping to address in this, and they're not going to help us.
Right.
It's our fault that it's there, and they're not going to help us.
Well, wasn't there a committee that was formed where, they had studied, they came up with numbers, was it the facility
Facility
Mission
something index, the
index.
FCI.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they
Yeah.
were, and sort of the theory was that they were interested in those that were in better condition, but those that were like in really bad condition, they felt they were putting good money after bad money and were going to punish, those, like if we, I don't know what the index we
We
have.
didn't score the lowest, but we scored very, very close to the lowest. We scored 93% fully kaput. So our
Okay,
our
yeah,
number
I
was
thinking low,
93%.
high. Yeah, I mean, low is good, high
Low,
is
low is
bad.
good, high is bad.
Yeah.
And so we were
Well-
93% of our usable quality of each
So,
system.
in
factored out
essence, what
93.7.
that would do would be to drive you to go to a new construction as opposed to dealing with the old. But that was all, I mean, that was all discussion, nothing, that was just sort of theoretical.
There was some
But that
spe-
was the
there was some
thinking.
speculation that they were trying to force consolidations, but they will
Mhm.
never say publicly they're trying to force consolidations.
Mhm.
But there's right now a lot of vilification of small schools that you're hearing,
Mhm.
and the words don't necessarily match the laws, but it seems like there's a lot of vilification of small schools and vilification of old buildings, and we're all small schools and old buildings.
And our problem in Vermont is our geography. I mean, it's a lot of driving to, especially today, for example, to get from A to B.
But it's a lot of dirt road busing, and it's a lot of people in need that have to be bused, and they have to be treated humanely in some way. And you end up with people asking people to travel on a bus for 1 hour to go to school for 7 hours to have a 10-hour day. It's a little bit damning. Somebody has to pay for that.
So to the bottom line, what you're saying is that we're now coming to another screeching halt because of what's happened. Is that kind of?
The law now says
Yeah.
that if we approach a bond,
Mhm.
our dollars are worth half. We'd be collecting. And so one of the speculative numbers that I saw was on the $45 million plan. The $45 million plan roughly matched what the old $70 million plan was in terms of the tax impact. That we already know that everybody rebuffed and everybody buckled that.
Yeah.
And so the best of the ideas that we had going forward, which was limited, is now more expensive or as expensive as previously, and that doesn't factor in any new changes. The $20 million plan looked like a $40 million plan in terms of the cost to the individual who lives in the house.
The longer this sort of we wait, I mean, either for the state or whatever, the more expensive things are going to get. I mean, $700 a square foot for a commercial property is crazy, but it's only going to get worse.
Well, and a lot of the anger that we got from citizens was that it should only cost $300 a square foot.
Right.
Those were the numbers that used to exist. It was $300 a square foot to build or
yeah, it wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't that long ago. It was $300 a square foot, and then the reality became more so, and the reality became more so. And what we're sitting on right now is we're going to have to walk away from this for a while. And I think that we're going to walk away from this for a while. I'm hoping that this changes. But unless this changes, there is no point in asking the taxpayers to commit funds to this, and we simply have to limp along.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of blowback all across the United States on the inflation bit. And it's not as much the trades anymore. It's more about the supply chain, and it's not directly at the place where they make things, or this it is all the individuals in the middle that are withholding stuff to crank up the rates. And that's a big problem. And I think they'll get enough blowback that maybe that will reduce, but who knows?
And I guess the question is, are we forced to pull from programming? My concern is the health and safety of those the $10 million budget that we have for the health and safety pieces of the school. That's the part that concerns me, that if we're not addressing those, I mean, not everything needs to be addressed, but the systems, but if we're looking at just the health and safety, at that point, we're having to choose if we have 9,000 to spend.
900
over our
900,000.
Then we're kind of stuck with choosing program and staff or our building safety. I just.
I think so. I don't know if you guys can hear me very well. I think though, safety is not how I would phrase this. The building is not currently unsafe. The building is safe to operate for sure. What it's looking at, like a big piece of that $10 million is having a sprinkler system, which is important 100% for sure. But I don't think not having one makes the building unsafe. And so I think we want to make sure to look at it that way, that we're not saying that our building's not safe for our kids to be in, because that's not true.
Yeah.
So some of those pieces are things that have to be done the moment we were to start any renovation or anything like that. That's where it hits the codes that have to be fixed.
So what I think I can do, what I think that we can do is look at the tax ramifications at our next board meeting of the $10 million plan at our regular board meeting, and say this is the bare minimum that we can possibly do, and take this up without trying to do anything grandiose or even necessarily good.
Right.
But we don't have to take this all the way. But what we were doing here in this committee was trying to determine what the best plan forward was to better the school. And we're now stuck not getting there. So if we look at the next board meeting in September at the tax ramifications of the $10 million plan, then you'll have a better idea as board members, so it's less speculative.
Right.
So that we can sort of map out just that one thing, these actions that we can take. And I'll talk to Mike about that, or I won't talk to Mike about that. I'll have the superintendent talk to Mike about that.
Yeah.
And then Michael talk to us about that, hopefully.
Yeah.
Prepare that.
A lot of there, if we pull stuff out of that 10 million and what can we afford, looking at that budget. But I think, right, for this committee though, if we're not looking at any space needs or we're not having any discussions on that, I think that probably makes sense. We're just trying to figure out what we can do within that limit.
Right. So I don't think that this committee necessarily needs to meet again, but neither do we need to stop communicating. So I like to keep the line of communication open if I can, and communicate with you, and if there's a chance to schedule another meeting. And we had a couple of people that wanted meetings at different times in this last one. Maybe we'll try to be better. If we can get another meeting, we'll obviously pick back up and be more open to trying to get everybody back in the room. But for right now, this committee's work needs to cease, because the work of this committee would be punitive to the community. And we'll continue on the board with the least possible thing we can do and see the tax ramifications of it. And I don't know if it's workable.
Okay. Have we got any areas, Brendan, that you think are really on the verge of failing?
Not that I've learned of yet, but I'm sure, everything's old. So
Well, of course, there's a lot of stuff below slab that we don't know about.
Right.
I would be, this is a very in the weeds question. It would be really interesting to know if we could put in shut-off valves into our plumbing so that we don't have an issue like we had last year where we had to send the entire school home because one toilet blew up.
And that isn't all that much of an expense to do that.
Right.
Well,
And I've done it at the home, and I'm so glad that I did it, because it's a lot easier.
It can be pretty expensive though. Like at my other school, I had not a lot of work done. It was $10,000, like a couple couplings and on water fittings and a few shut-off valves, because it is smart to put them in when stuff breaks and you're already fixing things, to put them in for the next time. But so it wouldn't take too long to get.
10 grand's better than 10 million.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, it's gonna be.
Yeah.
So are there any questions off Zoom
That's
here?
just
Does everybody understand what we're doing? Does everybody understand where we landed here? Does anybody need to have anything else sent to them from Act 183 or an interpretation? I can't send you the stuff from the finance director because it's all speculative. It doesn't. It's theoretical. So, but it was not good news, and it was a long meeting that I had with him, and he didn't have a single thing to say that made me remotely happy. Monetarily. So
I do have one clarification.
Okay, go ahead,
This is
Stacey.
Stacy. Thank you. Sure. That I know a need, and I know that there's the health and the safety. And Sarah, I'm really glad you reassured the group that the building is safe to continue, although it's not ideal. I do appreciate you pointing that out. Is there still the need for a separate pre-K, or at least maybe some sort of maybe modular building that we could maybe think about? Maybe it's a smaller unit that could supplement, at least for the time being, that might be a much lower lift and a lower level cost that might help give you at least so you don't have to turn away pre-K students.
So we can look into that, but that would all be construction money, and that would all be it would all put us over the spending limit. It would all have to be bonded out, and it puts us in the same space. Anytime you're bonding, you want to bond for a bigger number than a smaller number, and so it puts us in the same place. They would all be punitive.
I hear you. I hear what you're saying, Clayton. However, I think that in light of this, it may, if we're only saying maybe one building or two buildings or some other type of modular situation, maybe it's a temporary building to get us over the hump, that maybe we could lease it rather than have it as a construction cost, that it's not a permanent build, temporary building that is there so that we don't dip into quote construction. It's more of a leasehold, personal property type of situation instead, and maybe think more creatively. Like if you need a building, there might be other ways to be able to tackle that without having to do a bond or hard construction. So just some thoughts that maybe that we might have to get creative on that end of the spectrum. So I'm just throwing that out there because I am very familiar right now with doing modulars and mobile homes and those kinds of situations. And they call them personal property. And then when you attach them permanently, they're permanent real property. But if they're not attached, they're not permanent real property. So they're not considered in that traditional construction.
Still hit the budget.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you might have leases.
They just don't consider them. It's personal property.
The bigger
Yeah.
problem is that it would need to be plumbed.
And it would be ADA accessible.
Yeah, if we're doing early education.
Until we kind of looked at that, didn't we? Or-
I think
Well,
we
I'm
can-
just throwing it out there. Like if you're saying that maybe you could get something for 100,000 or 150,000, would this be something that we should look at? You know, I know that other states have done some temporary schools. Tufts has some temporary things going on there. So it's just some different ideas. You know, I don't want us to feel like we're completely trapped or stuck and can't move forward. And I know it's a lot less money, but maybe that would be just to throw it out there that it's not completely lost.
And it's easier with the upper grades than with the pre-K and the elementary because the requirements aren't the same. You see.
And I think anything we do is going to affect our per pupil cost. So any money that we're spending is going to affect our per pupil cost. And so I think we could do that, Stacy. And then I think it's whether this group wants to prioritize that over our other things would be the conversation. If we have like X amount of money to go over the threshold, if we all agreed that, yes, we want to spend it on preschool and lease the space, that's an option. You know what I'm saying? Like it all kind of funnels into that per pupil cost that we're limited by. And we have this like kind of finite amount of money that we can decide where we want to put it. And we could choose preschool or we could choose the HVAC system, or I think that's part of that conversation. Yeah, it's important. We don't want that to get lost for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Good. Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right,
Bummer.
anybody else?
What a bummer.
Does anybody have any questions? Is there any public input? For the time being, we're not going to schedule a future meeting for this group. We do have a meeting scheduled for the school board itself, and that will be the first Tuesday of September. And somebody tell me what day that is. September 3rd. And so the next meeting of the school board is September 3rd. We may have some information for you. If there's some information relevant to the building committee, I'll communicate with the building committee. And that will be at 6 o'clock on the 3rd. That's what time those are scheduled. Past that, if we find occasion to meet, I'll get with you guys and find out what makes the most sense to meet, when it makes the most sense to meet. And with that, that's where we are. And I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion to adjourn.
Dave, second.
Dave Toll seconds a motion to adjourn. All board members in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
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 And again, thank you for
Aye.
your time, folks. This is not dead. We just need to wait for them to understand what grave mistake they've made here. We need Montpelier to fix it so that we can fix ourselves. Thank you very much.